Hello dear subscribers and watchers, welcome back again. This is me Saidilia here from Computer Science for Software. In this tutorial, as I've promised you before, that we will have a review over the external and internal storages in Android. Okay, in the previous video I have discussed about the internal and external storages, how we can store our data privately and publicly. Okay, in this tutorial I'm just conceptualize the concept again for you guys. I hope you can understand them well in order to work with external and internal storages. So we will talk about the storing data in Android file system. So these are the contents that we will discuss about to store our data to the Android device. Well, these are the several options that you can use to store your data into your Android device. We have files, we have internal storages, which is these internal storages are external storages, okay, and also internal storages. Then we will talk about that if you store your files into the internal storage, it is more secure, and if you store your files to the external storage, it is not secure. But if you want to share your files or data with other apps, so you can use the external storages. So we will talk about this in the upcoming slides. Then, and in the next tutorial, I will create another tutorial about the SQLite database, how we can use the SQLite database to store our data privately in the Android device. Then there are several options also available to store our data on the cloud or other things. Let's talk about the storage options in Android. So these are the storing options that you can use them to store your data. There are several storage options are also available that you can use them to store your data. The first one is shared preferences that I've discussed about this in the previous tutorials, that where you can use the shared preferences to store your data in the key value pairs. You can save the data to the shared preference storage by giving it a key, and when you want to get that data from the shared preference storage, you must provide the key to that data in order to obtain that data from the preference storage. So the shared preference is really good if you want to store less data type, because for less heavy read and less heavy write. And again, the shared preference store its data to the XML, okay, to an XML file in your Android. And the next one is internal storage, where you can store your data privately on your phone. So if you consider privacy for your app, and if you want to force rules upon the files that you want to store them into the internal storage, you can force the security rules for your internal storage. Only your app can access to the files that you have stored with your app into the internal storage. So another one is external storage, where you store your public data onto the external storage of your phone or an SD card. This is used if you want to share data with other apps, and if you don't want the data to be deleted that you have saved with your app. For example, if there is a camera app and you have taken some photos with that app, so you don't want the files to be deleted when you uninstall its app. So you can use the external storage, and you must consider that if you use the external storage, there is no security enforced upon the files that you have saved to the external storage, because these files are public and it is available to every app on your Android device. So the next one is SQLite database, where you can store the structured data, and again this is also a private storage. SQLite is a relational database like other databases, but the only difference is that this SQLite database is single user, and it has all the capabilities of other storages, and this is a built-in database into your Android device. You don't need to install SQLite database onto your computer. Just use the Android ECDU because it supports the built-in database. You can use the content provider to store your data privately and make available to other apps. If I show you by an illustrations, imagine that this is the number, your phone number I mean, and this is your name, and this is your address, and if you have saved several data into your files, so in here you can decide which part of the data to be available to other apps or which part of data to be private. Okay, and here by using the content provider, I allow other apps to read the phone number from here. Okay, This is one of another advantage of content providers if you want to share data with other apps. And if you want to decide to make your data public and private, make sure that you use the content provider, that you can enforce some security rules upon the files that you have saved into the Android device. So another storing data beyond the Android device, you can use your network connection to store your data onto the web with your own server. If you have your own server, you can also use to save your files onto the web. And another one is cloud backup your data into the cloud. There are several cloud providers that allow you to store your data, and you can access that data everywhere from the world. Another storage option is Firebase real-time database, where you can store and sync data with NoSQL cloud database across clients and real. The Firebase database is also a cloud database, which is a NoSQL database where you store your data in the form of JSON format. Okay, we will talk about this in the next tutorial, how to store our data with Firebase real-time database. First, we will create a tutorial about the SQLite, then we will come over to the Firebase real-time database, how to store them into the cloud. So I hope you have understood something, how to store your data to Android device, how many storage options are available, if you want to use them to store your data, and if you decide to store your app privately, you can use the internal storage, or if you want to store your files publicly, any app can access its data, so you can use the external storage. Then we have learned that there is another storage option, which is SQLite, where you store your structured data privately, and content providers, where you enforce your data, which part of the data to be public and which part of the data to be private to other apps or to your own app. Now in this time we will talk about the files, how to store our files into the external and internal storage. So the Android file system allows you to store your data, the external storage and to the internal storage, because external storage has public directories, and it is, if you store your data into the public directory, so you can use the external storage, and this is available. Other apps can also access it to the public directories. These are the directories just for your app. Okay? If you want to store some data to the internal storage, so you must use the private directories, so that only your app can read, modify and delete them if the app wants. So this is, again, if you uninstall the app and if you have saved your files or data into the internal storage by your app, so these files will be deleted alongside the app. And if you don't want to delete your files when you uninstall the app, so make sure that you use the external storage. So apps can browse these directories in private directories and public directories, structured and unstructured, which operations are similar to the Linux. If you have used the Linux operating system, there are some operations that you allow the user, or you grant them the permissions to read and write. So now let's talk about internal storage. Internal storage is always available, because in your device there is some storage space that you can store your data there, and this internal storage uses the device file system to store your data, and only your app can access the files inside the internal storage, unless you explicitly set those files to be world readable and world writable, or if you want to make them publicly available to other apps, so we use the content providers, as I've discussed to you in the previous slide. So I've told you that if you have stored your data to the internal storage, when you uninstall the app, the system will remove all the files that belongs to your app from the internal storage. So now let's talk about the external storage. And external storage is not available because you store them into the micro SD card of your phone. The user removes the SD card, and you have saved some files to the external storage or to that SD card. So totally I can say that your app is screwed up. If the app can access to its files, which you have stored them into the external storage, so the app will not open and it crashes every time you open it. So again, it also uses the device's file system or physical external storage like SD card to store your files, and it is also world readable. So any app can read and write to it unless you set the permissions to it. On uninstall, the system does not remove files to private to your app. So again, if you have stored some files to the external storage, the system will not remove them, which are private to your app. So again, if you want to store some files that you want to be there if you uninstall the app, so you can use the external storage. There are some rules that you must provide in your app in order to save to the external storage that we will talk about in a couple slides about it. So now, when to use the external storage and when to use the internal storage. So internal storage is best if you want to store some files privately that neither the user nor other apps can access to your files. So make sure that you use the internal storage. So again, it is not private because the super user or the root user can still access to your internal storage. External storage is best for your files that you didn't provide or you didn't set any security restrictions upon them. If those are the files that they don't require access restrictions for reading and writing for the file. So if you want to share the files with other apps, so you can use the external storage for that, because you allow the user to access it with a computer or open the public directory and see the data of the file. So let's talk about the internal storage. We have discussed a lot about the external, so it's time to talk about the internal storage. So internal storage uses private directories just for your app. Only your app can access the private directories that you have stored your files into. That private directories, only your app has the permission to read and write to those files. And if you want to store your data privately into the internal storage, so you can use the get files dir, which is a permanent storage directory, and the files will be deleted when you uninstall the app. And if you want to store these files temporarily into the internal storage, I mean into the private internal storage, so you can use the method of get cache dir to store your files or data temporarily. You have to know that these files or cache files will be deleted if your system falls low in storage. The get files dir store your files into the internal storage, and if you want to store big files or big data to the files and still you want them to be private to your app, so you must store them to the external storage. Again, we have private directories in the external storage so that you can use that private external storage directory to save your files. In order to save your files to the private directory of your external storage, so call the external files dir. Okay, so call the get external. Okay, and here make sure that you provide a word external files dir. And again, these files which you have stored them privately onto the external storage will be deleted when you uninstall your app. And if you want to store your cache files to the private external storage, so you can call the get external cache dir, and make sure that you do not overload the user's SD card with the cache files. For creating a file, we use the file class. Okay, inside the file class, make sure that you call the get files dir. Get files dir and the first parameter of the constructor of the file, which it stores your data into the internal storage privately. And make sure that you provide a file name like t dot something like this. Okay, name of the file .txt, or any type of file you want to store inside the internal storages. Make sure that you provide an extension. The constructor of the file requires two parameters, which is the private directory of the internal storage and the file that you want to store inside this internal storage. And again, you can also use the Java input output file operators or streams to interact with these files. I mean to the files that you have saved them inside this private internal storage directory. So this is it for creating a file inside the internal storage. It's time to do practical work on external storage. So external storage saved a file on the device or SD card, and you must set permissions into the manifest file of your app. Okay, you must provide the read and write permissions into the manifest file. Okay, you can use these permissions like write external permissions if you want to do both writing and reading with that file, and if you want to do only read to that file, you must provide the read external storage. So these are the permissions that you must set to the manifest file if you want to access to the external storage. If you want to save your files into the external storage, make sure that you provide these two permissions. And always make sure yourself that check the availability of the external storage. Sometimes, as I've told you before, it may not be available, or it may be badly removed, or it may be corrupted because you have inserted via USB to a computer. So make sure that you check the availability of the storage. To check the availability of the storage, call the get external storage state by the environment class. Okay, you can access to that method by using the environment class. Okay, this external storage state returns you the state of your SD card, whether it is available or it has some free space to store your files there or not. So now you have got the state of your SD card. You can use any conditions you want. Again, you must use the environment class and call them medium mounted. Okay, medium mounted in here, it means that it is also in both forms, readable and writable. It is a public final static class variable inside the environment class. You have a state of read and write. You must call .get equals method and pass the state variable in here. Okay, whether to check that if it is available or not. And if you want to avoid the repetitions, so you can create a method and name that method as the write external storage writable to check if the external storage is writable or not. This is the way that you can check the availability of the external storage. If you want to check that whether it is available in both forms, I mean readable and writable. So these are the example to the public directories. Okay, you have some public directories like directory alarms, directory ringtones, which you use these directories for saving audio files, alarm ringtones or songs to these directories. And directory documents, this is a public documents that have been created in the Android device to save the documents that have been created by the user. Okay, and this is the directory of downloads for files that have been downloaded by the user or by your own app. So I'm gonna show you these public directories inside emulator. Okay, so you can see them. So if I show you these public directories inside your phone, okay, now I'm going to the settings and I go to the storage, your storage inside the Explorer. So you can see that these are the directories, public directories. You can see alarm directory, which is in here, and ringtones. Let's see if it is there or not. Okay, it is in here, ringtone directory. Okay, and this is the download directory. Okay, you can use these type arguments and pass them to the constructor of the get files dir or get external storage public directory in order to save your files into these public directories. In the same way, we have the private directories similar to this one. Okay, and you do not see the contents if you want to save your data privately into these directories of your internal storage. And again, if I want to clear something for you guys, some confusion about the external storages. So imagine that this is your phone, your Samsung phone, and it has about 8 GB of storage space. When you install an app, if that app is about 3 GB, okay, so this may be a Messenger or Facebook app. Okay, imagine that this is a Facebook app. When you install this 3 GB app into your device, so this app is going to install into your device and is going to occupy some space there. Okay, if I show you like that, it's going to use a space of your phone. Okay, it is Facebook app. So now your app has used 3 GB, although it is not 3 GB, but it has used some extra space for saving its files alongside itself. So now it has used 3 GB. Okay, it has used 3 GB and the total space is available 5 GB of storage. Okay, so now this remaining total space is external to your app. Why this is external? And again, if you use the SD card, okay, imagine that this is a micro SD card. It is a supporter for your external storages. Okay, if it is 32 GB, and again 32 plus 5 becomes 37 GB. Okay, SD card is a supporter to this external storages. So now if you want to store your data privately alongside the app, so you store those files inside the apps directory, which is private to your app. Only your app can access to these files. Other apps cannot access to the files. Let me clear some space to you and show you something in here also. So if you have installed another app, let me clear these also. If you have installed another app like this, and if it is a Messenger app, okay, and this occupies about 5 GB. Okay, imagine 5 GB. So now this app has its own private file and only this app can access to its files. Neither this app can access to the file of Messenger nor the Messenger app can access to the Facebook files. Okay, and again, if you want to share some files between these two apps, you use external storage, which is here. You use those download directories. Okay, download directories if you want to share its data with other apps, so you put those data inside this public directory, and your messenger now can use the files that Facebook has shared with you. This is the concept of the internal and external storage. Some devices have a built-in slot of SD card. So I hope you have conceptualized it. If you didn't understand it, make sure that you put your thoughts in the comments or your queries. I will try to answer them ASAP, okay? So now let's get back to our slide. So these are the public directories, okay? So I hope you have understand something from here. If you want to know more about the environment class, so this is the other spot. You can search this on the Google, and if you want to read more about this. So again, if you want to access to the public external directories, I mean to those directories that I've shown you in the emulator, and if you want to save the files there, so you can use the get external storage public directory, okay? By calling this method, you have a path to the external storage directories. So now you must create file to this path. For the creating of the file, we must first use the get external storage public directory. Again, you must call that method by using this class. Otherwise, you will not be able to use this method. Environment.getExternalStorage public directory. And now you must use the environment class where you want to save your file. I've shown you the directories, I mean the public directories in the emulator. Yes, there were several folders which have been created by your system. Some of those directories were pictures, documents, downloads, ringtones. And if you want to save to those directories, so make sure that you call them by the environment class, okay? In order to save a file to the directory of pictures to the external storage, we create a file object. And in the first parameter, we pass the path already created in here. And again, we must pass the name of the file that we want to store that. And this demo picture.jpg will be certainly stored into the public directory of pictures. And when you are dealing with storing data to the storages, if there was not enough space, so the app will throw the input-output exception, or it may arise an input-output exception. And if you want to avoid this input-output exception, make sure that you check the size of the file and the availability of the space. You can get the total space, which is 8 GB, okay? If your phone has 8 GB storage, so if you want to access to it, how much storage you have inside your phone by calling the get total space. And if you want to check that how much space is free in your phone, you can call the get free space. For example, that this is your phone, okay? And if you want to check how much space it has, so you can call get total space. You returns to you and tells you that this phone has the capability to store 8 GB files. So there may be, after several times you have stored some files inside this, so there may remain some storage, which is 2 GB. And if you want to see how much free space you have available right now, so you can call the get free space, which returns you only have 2 GB free space available in your phone to store your file. And if you do not know how much space is needed, so you can use the try catch in order to handle the input-output exception. If you want to delete the files that are no longer needed, for the external storage, use the file object and call the delete method. And for the internal storage, use the file object and call the delete file. I mean, call the context you're in and pass the file name. I mean, the file name that you want to delete. You can also use this delete method by using the file for deleting the files that you have stored them in the internal storage. You can also call this one. While uninstalling your app, do not delete the user's files, okay? When the user uninstalls your app's private storage directory and all of the contents that you have saved them will be deleted alongside the app. So if you don't want these files to be deleted when you uninstall the app, so make sure that you do not use the private storage. For the contents that belong to the user, use the public directory. For example, photos that are captured or edited with your app, or music that user has purchased with your app. Use the public directories in order if you don't want to delete those files or those data when you uninstall your app. So this was just an overview of our previous tutorial. I hope that I have conceptualized it for you. And this brings us to the end of this particular tutorial. And if you like what you watched, make sure that you put your thoughts in the comment boxes below this video and support us in any way you can. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icons. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out. Have fun learning.